to another episode of Addiction Uncovered, where we talk about the truth behind addiction and hear inspirational stories of recovery. I'm your host, Jill, and today I'm joined by Mallory. Mallory previously struggled with addiction and now owns a successful intensive outpatient program in Utah, which is dedicated to men coming out of prison. She is dedicated to sharing how addiction looks different for each person, but if we can come together and share a message of change and hope, it helps everyone to find recovery. So thank you for joining us, Mallory.
Yeah, thank you all for having me.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about where your own struggle with addiction started.
So, my addiction really started in a place of wanting to be loved, if that makes sense, at a young age. Um, I was a teen mom, but I feel like it started before that with a lot of low self-esteem. My dad was an addict. He's a recovering addict. And my mom really took on everything, especially when they got divorced. And when I was younger and even through my early adult years, it was really hard for me to grasp it. My sister was an addict too. She's 4 years older than me. And in a way, it really felt like all the attention and time went to her. And in a lot of ways, I feel like I wasn't emotionally being shown up for. As I got older, I realized, this is my mom's first time doing life also, right? And yep, we do until we hit our own struggles. And I realized, she was doing the best she could. She had a troubled youth program as I was growing up, and she later went to adults. She went and opened up a detox center in a behavioral hospital here in Utah that only saw teens and teen and elderly. My bad, geriatric technically. And she was really passionate about helping addicts. I feel like work became an addiction for her, which I absolutely understand. My mom wasn't an addict to substances, and I really feel like she didn't make it a passion like she had prior, so it became an addiction, which I understand. It takes you out of the what's reality. And so in a lot of ways, we weren't just mentally and emotionally being shown up for. And I don't blame my mom for that. I understand now if that makes sense. So I would turn to men and substances. That was my outlet. That's how I felt that I was loved or accepted, didn't wanna be abandoned, and wanted to numb myself like most addicts do. I wanted to step away from reality and abandonment, right? And in a lot of ways, relationships were transactional in a way. I've heard that a lot in a lot of treatment that I've done, and it is really the truth. With God, with family, who we love, is we need to be a certain person or meet expectations in order to not be abandoned and loved. And the gateway to get out was substances for me and men.
Yeah, and I appreciate you being honest about that because as a mom of two teenage girls right now, I think that's one of my biggest fears is losing them to, and they're adopted too. So we talk about all the abandonment and the fear around that. But with my kids being, two girls in high school and being pretty susceptible because of their history with being adopted as well, I think that's one of my biggest fears is that despite all the things that I try to do to make them feel a sense of belonging and acceptance, being afraid that they will turn to substances or will turn to maybe unhealthy relationships in order to feel that. So I'm sure that speaks to a lot of girls that were probably in a
Yeah,
very similar
yeah,
situation as you.
absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Growing up in Utah was hard. It's prominently LDS. So when you're not LDS, right? And my mom, of course, was helping drug addicts. So that was hard. it's hard to find friendships and people close to you on top of that household stuff. And most of the time, when you find those friendships, it's struggling homes, right? In a way, I was a very rare home where my mom did well successfully, but we were not LDS. And so it was easy to turn to those people who were struggling, or were in terrible households, or and I feel like that contributed a lot. On top of, my dad was absent, my mom worked a lot. And I feel the same way with my kids. That was a fear, is if I don't do A, B, or C, that was a huge thing. To me, I was really worried about becoming a statistic after I had my son. I felt like I had to double down, which I'm grateful now. And my addiction got worse, of course, throughout the years. My children are 9 years apart. And I just feel like my addiction and the way of not healing or thought that I was healed, or if I did this, this would make me healed. It evolved my whole life. A marriage, marry somebody in Utah, they call them normies, right? Somebody who's not an addict. And I was just self-destructing and destroying everything around me.
Mhm. And trying to raise children at the same time, that had to
Yeah.
have been really
Yep.
difficult.
Absolutely. You want to be the best mom that you can. And
Yeah. And so how long did that go on? How long did your struggle with addiction last?
I would say up until I started around, I'd say 15 or 16. I had my son at 17. And then I knuckled down, did what I had to do. I decided to go to college. I did hair school. Hair school got me through college. And I just continued to choose toxic relationships. And within those relationships, I almost fall into whatever substance they were doing. Yeah. Yeah, and I would get in trouble. I was going to jail. I was actually on adult probation and parole here in Utah for a long time. And then I was sober for a really long time. I'd say I was sober till from about 2022 until right before I got a divorce when I was 28 years old. And then from 28 to about 33, I was really struggling. And that's when I finally got sober. Mhm. Mhm.
Hmm. What was the turning point for you and how did you get sober?
I think it was finally starting to heal, and I wanted to blame my ex-husband in a lot of ways or other men that I had been with. I was in a toxic relationship at the time, another one, and he had a bad substance use issue. And I figured, if I got sober, he would too, right? We try and play God. And I was working for a intensive outpatient center, a little different than mine. And I had a man come to me and he owned 2 male sober livings. And he said, "Hey, do you want to work part-time with me? I see how hard you work here." So it was very minimal that I could work with him. And the years went by, I'd help him on and off, but we stayed good friends. And, he called me out on my addiction quick because my addiction when I was younger was not the same as it was when I was older. It was easy to function better. It was easier to hide things. I wasn't getting in trouble with the law. And, he called me out one day and I took it. I finally, I surrendered in a lot of ways instead of being, "You don't know what you're talking about." And I took his advice and he mentored me. And I'll never forget, that was the first time I ever heard the story of the Jaywalker. It comes from AA. And I'll be honest, my program isn't centered around AA, but Jaywalker, that story of the level of insanity. was really what changed me, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results.
Mhm. Yeah. Is there more to that story? Just because it's been really powerful for you, I've heard that saying before, but I've not really heard really where that comes from. Is there more of a background to that story?
Yes, so it's a story in the big book, and it's called The Jaywalker, right? And it's actually a man who continues to jaywalk. So he jaywalks, and eventually, let's say he gets a ticket, right? He goes to jail. He gets hit by a car eventually, and he's in the hospital, and his wife and family, like, we're done with you, right? That you keep doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results, which equals the level of insanity, which ties to addiction, right?
Mm-hmm. So that really stuck with
Which
you.
ties to shit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that really stuck with you. And that was what that story and working with your mentor that really hit home for you. And that's when you
Yeah,
decided that things
absolutely.
needed to be
And his
different.
sober livings were called the Jaywalker. Hmm. Yeah,
Oh.
yeah,
Well, thanks for
yeah.
sharing that story. I mean,
And that's
again,
how
I've
we
heard
kind
that
of
slogan so
ended up
many
opening
times and it
intensive
does really
outpatient. Yeah.
resonate.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about your program because I find it really interesting that you are dedicated to this population that in your history that is kind of unique, right? Because you talk about your
Mhm.
relationships with men as you were younger and getting
Mhm.
into unhealthy relationships. And now your program is really dedicated to men. So help us to understand, like, where did this idea come from and this passion? Tell us about that.
So the sober livings were all male, but they weren't men who had been in out of incarceration. To be real, it was mostly men who came from some of the bougier residential treatment centers. We call it kind of a bougie one here in Utah. And our plan was to, credential with commercial insurances, and we wanted to get into that type of clientele. And that's really not how it ended up going. When you first start a program, especially here in Utah, they'll always say credential with Utah Medicaid first. It gets you money coming in. And there's a lot of people on Medicaid. So that's what we did. And it was really odd. One day I just randomly had a call from a prison, and it was a friend of mine I hadn't seen in a lot of years, and he had gone to prison, and he said, "I was just thinking about you and how things were going. What's new with you?" Right? And now, actually today, the past year, he's my partner, right? Which is crazy. But I told him I'm just trying to open up this treatment center, and he was kinda like, "All right, you're a little crazy, but okay, sure." And a few months later, I got a call from that same prison, and it was one man, and he said, "Hey, Chris, your friend at the time, gave me your phone number, and I'm getting out of prison soon, and I really need some help." So I thought, "Darn it, this is gonna be rough, but it will give us the clients, right?" So it did. And from there, I'll be honest, it just unfolded so quickly, so fast. And I felt like it was really meant to be because in a lot of ways, I never felt accepted. I mean, even in the addiction community, I felt so out of place, like a fish out of water. And for once, I felt, like, wow, I'm good at something. Wow, I am touching people. Wow, these kind of are my people, despite me ever even going to prison. And I just blew up really fast over that, just giving these men hope when that population, especially in Utah, is really thrown to the wolves. You know? They get the help and support they need. There's not a lot of programs that do that. And I just got really passionate about it and saw my place, my purpose, and I ran with it.
That's awesome. So, what do you think is unique about the type of people that you serve, people that are coming out of prison and trying to reintegrate back into the community? What are some challenges that you see with those particular people?
A lot of them, they've been in flight or fight mode. When it comes to the treatment side, they're used to superiors and they're negative superiors. And a lot of these men have been doing this their whole life. Some of them have done some pretty violent crimes. We're not licensed to take sex offenders, but we are licensed now to take violent offenders. So murder, aggravated assault, robbery, and gang affiliations.
And that all comes
Mhm,
with its own challenges.
there's yep, yeah, they felt given up on, and with that, they self-sabotaged very quickly, and that's how I relate it to them is the abandonment. They feel like they're gonna be abandoned. One wrong thing they do or all the tattoos on their face or gang affiliations, someone's gonna give up on them, and that's a lot of self-sabotaging that they do when they're not guided, with love. I'm a huge believer of that. Lead with love.
Mhm. Well, and what I see too, as a therapist and just working in the behavioral health field in general, is that everybody has a story and everyone has a reason why they do certain things. And a lot of times, I hear certain stories, and I think you can probably relate, where I just think, of course, this is the lifestyle that you ended up with. Of course, you turn to
Yeah, yeah.
substances to escape. Of course, you turn to these abusive interactions or relationships because that's what you've known. And so it doesn't, not to excuse any of the behavior or any of that, but it's more just
Right,
as an
right.
understanding of this is this is the solution for a lot of people. This is what they've known. So to show them a different way is really challenging, but also really important, which is exactly what you're doing.
Yes, yeah, thank you. I feel like empathy is a huge thing, right? And that's huge in therapy and teaching. And I've learned to have a lot more of it, especially with this type of clientele. You have to, and which helps them gain it as well.
Hmm. And I also think the message that you're giving to them and the care that you're providing is that no matter what your past has been, no matter what your charges have been, that you deserve a life just as everyone else does. You deserve happiness, you deserve
Yes.
success, you deserve
Yes.
peace and love, regardless of what your history has been.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a huge part of my program too, is making them feel like they're not a fish out of water like I did. I have to implement, therapy and treatment based or evidence based treatment, but I really try to focus on reentry as well because I've noticed when, somebody believes in you and cares about you and you're trying to change your life and someone showing you how, right? I always tell them there's no stupid questions. Even if it's how do I use Google? How do I make a doctor's appointment? And when you start learning how to live life, then you start learning more about yourself and you start saying, "Hey, I want to work on me now, my healing. I am a person that's capable."
Mhm. Do you see that often where maybe people in your program have a hard time seeing that they deserve that life or that there's that hope? Is it hard to kind of show them or convince them, I guess, that they're deserving of that?
In a lot of ways, yes. The thing that I decided to do with my program was when I started getting calls, most programs here in Utah, you get on a list, right? And when you get out of prison, you show up to the treatment center. And when I started to get to know some of these men, I have them check in with me once a week. And in doing so, I learn a lot about them, right? They really open up. You see the emotions start to come out and it's almost like you're starting that guiding them before they get out. And when they get out, my favorite thing is when I go to the prison on Tuesdays because I don't know what these men look like, right? And they just light up when they see you because they feel like they know you, and they feel like they're going somewhere where they're comfortable and somebody believes in them and encouraging them before they get out when because they're still in a dark spot then. It almost feels like they're not going to get out, like something's going to happen to delay them getting out, even if they have a release date. So giving them that hope and then seeing them, like I said, light up when they meet you and they see your face, it's just really cool.
Hmm. Well, and you're showing up for them. You're showing that through phone calls before they
Yeah,
even are released, and
yeah.
then literally showing up at the prison for them to say, hey, we're continuing this. This isn't just something we're doing for show. This is
Yeah,
something that we're committed to. That's so cool. Um, so
definitely. Yeah, I feel like that's a big component is picking
mhm,
them up.
that's right. It shows them a lot. And I think I was just talking with someone yesterday about how do I support someone who's struggling if they're not ready? And my biggest message during that conversation was you just show up. You show up and you keep showing up and you wait and you express things and then you pull back a little bit. And then it's just this little dance that you do. But just being present and showing up, it can make the world of difference for people. So that's cool that you go the extra
Yeah, it
mile to
does.
do those
It
things.
is.
Yeah.
I always say the ministry of presence, right?
Oh, I love that. The ministry of presence. I love that. So, what would you tell someone who is currently struggling with addiction, whether it's that they're in the community, they're incarcerated, whatever that looks like for them, and we know that they're struggling. What would you tell someone?
I guess the biggest thing I would tell them, don't wait until you don't think that healing is going to come for you. And don't wait until you're fully healed to think that you're capable of anything. Healing is a constant thing. And also that you're not, I mean, the biggest thing, I know it's cliche, but you're not alone. You have to reach out. As addicts, we can become very selfish and we think we're the only ones struggling, right? No one has a story like mine. And if you're not willing to reach out and just accept that love, right? And be honest and say, I have nothing to offer you, but I need the support and willing, I'm willing and ready to do something different.
Yeah, I love that. That's so wonderful. Tell us a little bit more. I know you've touched on it a bit, but I want to make sure that people know what your program is, where they can find you. I love that. I love that the podcast is reaching into these spaces like Utah. Being out of little old Omaha here. That's so exciting to me that it's reaching so
It's
many
really
people.
cool.
Yeah, and I have heard that I haven't been to Utah, but I've talked to enough people there recently to know that it's a big recovery community from what I understand. There's a lot of different options for people. Maybe have a different perspective, but that's what I'm hearing, at least from the little that I know. So, anyway, all of that to say, tell us more about where people can find you, what programs you're offering, and what makes you unique.
So I have a intensive outpatient and then we have two male sober livings. And yeah, I'm always encouraging my clients, listen to podcasts. So when they're staying stagnant and haven't found a job, do something that's productive in some way. Just put addiction, right? And that's how I ended up hearing about you. And because they start to encourage you, like, hey, look what I found, they get excited. And Utah is the treatment capital of the United States, I feel like. We do intensive outpatient as the treatment portion, and then sober living where they live. We're licensed with the state of Utah. Intensive outpatient, we offer um, groups every night. We could do. There's a thing called day treatment, so we offer that. We offer individual therapy groups. Your typical treatment. that most of them are ordered to do. And that's where we kind of just tried to make a twist on it and put a lot of what we made in back into, you know, making our program better, doing that extra. And so their groups are something they want to come to, right? It's something most, right? They do get sick of it, but it's ordered, but I want to make it so they're coming to say, "Hey, I'm doing this to change my life."
Mhm.
We're located in Orem, Utah. It's called the Utah Valley, Utah County. And both our houses, we have 3 houses now, and our office where we do our treatment is just there in Orem.
That's amazing. Well, and what it really sounds like the basis, just to sum it up, is really the basis of your programming is connection and loving people when maybe they feel like they're alone or don't deserve it, or aren't ready for it. But that connection and the love for people is really the foundation for what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I feel like that's anybody, not just men that get out of prison, is being able to feel that, especially when you have to go to treatment or you're ordered by a system that's broken and you know it's broken. And I always tell them you need to learn you need to learn with them, not against them.
Hmm.
Work with them, not against them. I can hear myself, so sorry about that.
Yeah, and I think we can also learn so much from the people that we work with. We learn so much. I realize the more that I open up to these conversations and I meet people who are in recovery and or doing things within recovery spaces, the less and less I know. You think you know things and then you hear stories
Mhm.
or you hear what
Yep.
people are
Mhm.
doing and
Yep.
you're just amazed by that. So I'm really honored to have met you, and I'm excited to
Likewise.
learn even more
Likewise.
about the work that you're doing in Utah. I might have to come and visit. Apparently, there's a lot of cool things happening out there. So I'll let you know.
There is in the recovery. Yeah, do. Let me know for sure. Yeah, I can connect you with a lot of people, and that's what's cool about Utah.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for creating a program that's dedicated to the men in your community that really need it, specifically for men that may have struggled with addiction in the past and really need stability and connection. Thank you for doing that and keep doing the great work that you're doing. It's been a pleasure to get to know you.
Hey, likewise. Yeah, thank you. We need more of it, and to have a podcast. Like I said, you just Google or not Google, put in the search bar on your podcast addiction and just like this, it's really cool that you're able to provide those stories for people because you never know when that's gonna make them want to take the next step.
Hmm. Absolutely. All right, Mallory, thank you so much for being here and for sharing your story and your programs.
Yeah, hey, thank you so much for your guys' time and this opportunity.